Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the best mid laners for patch 6.18. So first up is going to be Aurelien Soul. Now Aurelien has had a pretty good win rate for these past few patches now. He's always sitting at around 52 or 53%, but his pick rate is always pretty low. It's only at around like 2 or 3%, so you don't really get the best indication from that as to how strong he is. But these past few patches, I've played with a few pretty good Aureliens on my team, that's for sure, and I do think that he's a pretty strong champion if you can play him correctly. He does counter a lot of the meta jungle champions that are being played right now. We're seeing a lot of junglers like Zac. I think Zac's got one of the highest pick rates for any jungler right now. Kha'Zix is being played a lot still. I think Zac's got around like a 12 or 13% pick rate, and Kha'Zix has around like a 15% pick rate. So if those two champions are picked, I would definitely recommend trying out Aurelien because he does a really good job at just keeping those champions off his carries with his ultimate. He's a very strong roaming mid lane champion too. Whenever you do hit 6 as Aurelien, then definitely look to start roaming. You can use your E to just get over walls and pull off some really good roams and just get your other lanes snowballing. His EQ engage combo can also be really strong, and it can just surprise the enemies if you can use that correctly and in the right situation. He does a lot of consistent damage too with his W, and his burst damage is actually quite surprising too. His ultimate does do quite a bit of damage, and if you can get that off on like a few targets in a team fight, it's definitely going to do some pretty good work. Now, when should you look to pick Aurelien? I would definitely look to pick him into pretty much anything but assassins. He does struggle a little bit against champions like Zed or Talon. If you are in those matchups though, you can still win them, but I would recommend taking exhaust in those matchups just so you don't get blown up right away. Also, you don't really want to build Azanias on Aurelien because you want to go for your Rylai's as quick as possible, and you also want to go for the Hex Tech item that gives you the slow. So if you do have to buy Azanias, then it's kind of delaying your power spike a little bit. And also definitely look to pick him if the enemy team does have a heavy dive comp. He can do really well if you can just use your ultimate in the correct times to keep those dive champions off your carries. Next up is going to be Anivia. So I think that Anivia is just a really reliable mid lane pick right now. She's pretty much got like one of the best kits in my opinion for any mid laner. She's got good wave clear, she's got good burst damage, she's got really good zone control as well with her W, her ultimate, as well as her Q. So she does have a very strong kit, that's for sure. Her burst combo is pretty easy to use and it's really effective. For some reason though, I don't see Anivia players use this combo, and it just really frustrates me when I'm playing with an Anivia and they just don't use their RE combo to get a lot of easy burst off and a lot of, it's just instant burst, and I don't know why Anivia players don't use this more often. Definitely look to do that though when you are playing her. Just throw down your ultimate and then E right after that, and you're gonna deal a large chunk of the squishy's health bar. She does also have pretty good she's very strong against non-gap closer champions too, so someone like a Darius or a Skarner, because she can do a really good job at just slowing them down with her ultimate, and she can just zone them off really nicely with her W. She's got a very strong passive too. Whenever her passive is up, then it's just so hard to play against an Anivia, because if you try to dive on her and her passive pops, then you're gonna either have to like kill her passive, or if you don't kill her passive, she's gonna come back up and deal a ton of damage. So her passive is definitely very strong, that's for sure. And as for when you should not pick Anivia, I would definitely look to pick her against low mobility champions just because she does a really good job at kiting them. Also, if your team does lack wave clear, then that's a great situation to pick Anivia because she is one of the best wave clear mid lane champions. Now, I would try to avoid assassins unless you're really confident on your Anivia. Then I just find it annoying to deal with assassins like Zed or Talon, because in team fights, if you don't have your egg up or you don't end up having a Zanyas, then you can get bursted down really easily, and you can't really do too much against those champions unless you do have Azanias or your passive is up. Next up here is going to be Ahri. So Ahri's pretty much my go-to mid lane pick right now. She's just a very reliant mid lane champion because you can pretty much pick her into anything and expect to do well, or you have the ability to do well into almost any matchup in the game. She does have a lot of mobility in her kit too, which allows her to do really well against skill shot reliant mid lane champions. So if the enemy team does lock someone like a Brand or a Lux, or someone who does need to hit skill shots to deal damage, then you can do well as Ahri because you have your ultimate at level 6, which is the dash, and if you just dash out of their skill shots, then you're pretty much going to win the trade every single time, and you should be able to beat them in the 1v1. She does a very good pick potential too with her charm, which is one of the main reasons why I just really like Ahri. Her charm is just such a game-changing ability if you can hit that on the priority targets in a team fight, and even if you are behind or if your team does fall behind, that one charm on that fed carry could end up tilting the game into your favor, or it could just end up winning your team the game. She's a really good roaming champion too because of the mobility with her ultimate, so when you do hit level 6, look to go bot, look to go top, and try to get a snowball going. So when should you look to pick Ahri and when should you not look to pick her? Definitely look to pick her against like non-gap closer AD carries and mid laners. It is a little bit harder to play Ahri if the enemy team does have someone like an Ezreal or a Sivir, or if they do have a mobile, or if they do have a mid laner who does have a gap closer, because she is a pretty skill shot reliant mid lane champion. So unless you're really confident in your Ahri, then I would try to avoid those matchups. Also, look to pick her against skill shot reliant mid lane champions. Like I touched on earlier, her ultimate does a really good job at countering those champions. Next up is going to be Vel'Koz. So right now, Vel'Koz is a very strong mid lane pick, mainly because he's received a lot of buffs recently, and he's also just got a very strong kit for solo queue. He's got a lot of wave clear, he's got a lot of burst damage, he's a long ranged mid lane champion too, so that means he does a pretty good job in a lot of matchups in the laning phase. I find that I almost always get a solo kill in lane as Vel'Koz because if I'm playing against someone like a Twisted Fate or an Annie or a Vladimir, Vel'Koz outranges those champions, so if the Annie tries to go in for a Q on you, or if the Twisted Fate goes for like a gold card, then you can throw out your Q and just back off, use your EW, and if your EW does hit, you can throw your ultimate out, and that burst combo is just absolutely insane. I find myself always picking up solo kills with Vel'Koz in the laning phase with that combo, so never be afraid to use it. Throw out your Q. If it hits, throw out your EW, because if you throw your Q out and it hits, they're going to be slowed, which allows you to easily line up that E and your W, pop your ultimate after that, and if they don't have flash or if they don't have summoners, then it's a free kill pretty much every single time. He also does do pretty well like in team fights because he's got a lot of AoE damage. He can do well against those like low mobile AD carries because his ultimate just allows him to reach that back line as well as his Q. So if he gets the Q off on like the AD carry in a team fight, then they're pretty much dead after that. When should you not look to pick Vel'Koz? I would definitely look to pick him against those lower ranged mid lane champions. So an Annie or a Vladimir, Vel'Koz can do really well in those matchups. He really doesn't have any champions, or there are very few champions that hard counter Vel'Koz or can do really well against him, but I find myself doing a little bit worse if they do have a Zed on their team, or if the enemy team does have a heavy dive comp. So I would recommend just like banning out Zac if you are playing Vel'Koz. Zac is one of the most picked junglers this patch, and if he gets on you in a team fight and he gets his E off on you, then you're probably gonna die just because he can follow up with a lot of CC, and you also don't have a gap closer on Vel'Koz, so you are pretty vulnerable to those long range abilities like Zac E, like a Leona ultimate. If you are going up against a team who does have like long range crowd control, then it's never a bad choice to take cleanse. So if they do have someone like a Leona or an Ashe, I usually do go cleanse on Vel'Koz. And to round out the top 5 for this patch, I have Cassiopeia. So I've been spamming Cassiopeia these past few weeks in solo queue, and I've been having really good success on her. She's a really strong pick right now just because she does do great against those dive champions due to her ultimate. Her ultimate does a great job at countering those picks like Kennen and Gnar, because if they try to jump in on your back line, or if they try to run at you and dive, then you can just throw your ultimate down, throw your W down, and it's just a really nice disengage range tool. She does a lot of DPS damage, which is damage per second, and she also does a lot of burst damage. Now, if you remember back, like when Malzahar was really overpowered, he was so strong because he did a lot of burst and he also did a lot of consistent damage, like with his W. It's kind of the same for Cassiopeia. She can do a lot of burst damage, like with her ultimate, her Q, and her E, but because of her E, she can also deal a lot of damage per second, which just makes her a really strong pick in my opinion. She also does have great zone control with her W. When you are playing as Cassiopeia, you want to try to fight the enemies in the jungle if you can, just because your W pretty much covers the whole jungle or the whole path in the jungle, and it's really hard for the enemies to like come at you or engage on you when your W is down. She does have a game-changing ultimate too. If you can get that off on like a few targets in a team fight, or if you can just use it to peel for your carries in a team fight, then it can be a very strong and a very rewarding ability. Now, when I do play Cassiopeia, I find that I can get a level 2 all-in first blood a lot of the time. Now, what you want to do is you want to try to get a little bit of poke down at level 1, but you don't want to like go all in at level 1 just because you want to wait for that level 2 so that you can hit the Q and then start spamming your E on them. Try to get them to around like half HP or a little bit above half HP at level 1, like with your E ability, and then go for that all in at level 2 because it can definitely surprise a lot of opponents. So when should you not look to pick Cassiopeia? I would look to pick her against those dive champions like Kennen and Gnar. Now, they can do well against Cassiopeia. It all comes down to the timing of your ultimate. If you can use your ultimate correctly against those champions, then she can do really well. But if you like whiff your ultimate or you just don't use it in the right situation, then she can get caught out pretty easily. So you just have to be using your ultimate in the right situations as Cassio. And I would try to avoid assassins or long range crowd control. So like an Ashe or a Leona can do pretty good against Cassio just because she's not the longest range mid lane champion and she can get caught out pretty easily if she just does a little misposition in a team fight. And against assassins, if you're playing against someone like a Zed, then I find it hard to beat a Zed or to do well unless you do end up rushing a Zhonya's, but I just don't like rushing Zhonya's on a champion like Cassiopeia because you want to go for the Rylai's, you want to get Morellos, and if you have to rush a Zhonya's like first item, then it's kind of delaying your power spike. So unless you're really confident on your Cassio, then I would ban out Zed if you are looking to play her. And to round out the video, the honorable mentions for this patch are going to be Annie, Brand, Kennen, Lux, Ziggs, and Twisted Fate. So Lux is making another appearance on my list for the first time in a few patches now, that's for sure. She did get a buff to her E this patch, which is making her definitely a stronger pick now. Whenever Riot does put more crowd control onto an ability or onto a champion, it's just going to make that champion a lot stronger because crowd control is a very strong stat in League. The more crowd control a team has, it's usually going to increase their chances of winning a game. So making Lux's E slow for more now is definitely going to make her a stronger teamfight champion. It's going to allow her to kite better in team fights as well. So if you're thinking about picking up Lux this patch, then I would definitely recommend it. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. If you did enjoy, then don't forget to leave a like. Subscribe if you guys have not already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.